Hi everyone, welcome. We'll just wait a minute or so for more people to join and then get started. Okay, over to you, Matt.
So good afternoon, everyone, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to our webinar, Let's Get Real, Lessons Learned for Building a New World of Hybrid Working. Hybrid working is something that is on everybody's lips at the moment. It follows the sudden change and the overnight shift that we all went through, well, two and a half years ago nearly, where we all had to suddenly move into home working practices, at least if we worked in offices. And now there's a kind of a second shift that's taken place where the home working has now moved into what we now call hybrid. And I kind of wonder how many people would have had a clear idea what hybrid working meant 2 years ago, but it's something that we're all talking about. And I think the point there is that hybrid working is not just about technology decisions, although they're very important, but it's all about the way that we work together. It's all about people, and you have some people within the office in the physical spaces, and then other members of the team maybe working at home. And how do you bring them all together? And how do you ensure that you've got equal involvement and participation and enthusiasm for working together, regardless as to whether you're at home or in the office? How do you maintain that cohesion? And I'm delighted to say that we have 4 extremely experienced panelists in the room, and I'll invite them to come in a moment. But I'll just explain who we will be talking to over the next hour, starting with Penny Pullen. And Penny is the author, there you go, thanks Lizzie, the author of Virtual Leadership, Practical Strategies for Success with Remote or Hybrid Work and Teams. It's a fascinating book. I'm halfway through it. It's in its 2nd edition, and Penny republished her book, I think about 2 years ago, with a whole new chapter on hybrid working. Highly recommended. Second in the room, we have Simon McCarthy from BCS, the Chartered Institute of IT. And Simon will be spending a bit of time talking about how the organisation rolled out a full hybrid working plan about 2 years ago. And so that's some very interesting and practical experiences that he's going to share with us. Third in the room, we have Tim from Microsoft, and Tim is a partner solutions architect at Microsoft. And of course, with Microsoft very much at the forefront of creating some smarter workplace experiences, I'm really looking forward to hearing Tim offering some unique insight into the kinds of conversations that are taking place at Microsoft and what we can expect on the horizon. And finally, we have our very own Holly, and Holly is a modern workplace solutions architect at Clarinet. She's lots and lots of experience, 15 years in this area. She's a Microsoft certified educator, and amongst other things, Holly was involved in the rollout of Microsoft 365 across a very large organization that involved 50,000 users. So if you need somebody to help with areas of change and adoption, then Holly is your person. And today she's going to be focusing on something that we all often grapple with, which is running meetings, and specifically how to run effective meetings in a hybrid workplace environment. So these are our 4 panelists. So everybody, if you want to come in and join us in the room, and I'll introduce you to everybody. There you go. There you are. Pleasure to meet you all, and thanks for your time. And we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to talk about from various different aspects of the subject. Penny, let's just start with yourself. And if you were to summarize hybrid working in just a few words, maybe a few words of advice or an insight, how would you talk about it? Can you hear me, Penny? I think you need to put your sound on.
I'm trying.
There you go. So
okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So,
yeah.
Hybrid working, few words.
So hybrid. The world of work has shifted. It's not going back anytime soon or ever. We need to focus on work outputs, not inputs, not where people are or when they're working. How's that?
Good. And we'll come back to hear a little bit more from you about all of that. Simon, same for yourself. Just a couple of words to summarise your take on this notion of hybrid working.
Sure. Hello, everybody. So for here, BCS really is looking at making sure your systems, your staff and your devices are ready for hybrid working, and that's sort of the positives of hybrid working and also the challenges that come with that.
Brilliant, thank you. And to Tim, let's come over to yourself and the kind of conversations that you're having with Microsoft and the way that you think about this topic.
Thanks, Matt, for the opportunity. I think the hybrid is one of the largest and most rapid changes we've seen in recent times. And hybrid existed before, but now hybrid has got a new name, it's got a new form, and instead of it being the exception, it's the norm. And we need to look at how we can utilise that going forward.
Brilliant, and I look forward to hearing a bit more from you around that. And finally, Holly, what's your take?
Hi there, Matt and everyone. I think for me, it's about making everything easy and accessible for all.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, well, I mean, we've had a chance to say hello to you all. So what we're going to do now for the next 15 minutes or so is to give each of you a bit of time to present your thoughts over 3 or 4 minutes each, and we'll go around the room, and I'm sure that'll be very interesting. We'll give each of you a chance to ask a few questions if you have any, and indeed everybody in the audience, if you have any questions that start to come to mind as the panelists are presenting their short speaking session, then now's the time to really start to send your questions in. And then towards the end of the webinar, the last 15 minutes or so, we will open up questions out to everyone, and we will have an open session to finish the webinar. So Penny, let's begin with yourself, and yeah, about your view of working.
Thank you very much, Matt. As Tim said, some of us have already experienced this shift, working in different places, in the office or from home or elsewhere. I've been working like this for 20 years now. Now we have hybrid, some work at different places and meet virtually. But also what we're noticing, as well as flexibility of place, we're also noticing flexibility of time when people are doing the work. We don't all need to work together. We can work asynchronously. When there are some things where we do need to be working together, all in a meeting at the same time, but we don't always need to be working together at the same time. So we can flex work, and that can make things much more inclusive, because perhaps people need to start a little bit later or find it easier to work in the evening, or particularly last week it was incredibly hot and working in the early afternoon was difficult. People can flex with hybrid working and get the work done. So we need to shift, as I said earlier, from looking at the inputs, the people sitting in front of their desk, being there from 9 till 5, and look instead, focus on the outputs that come from that work. And the pandemic, as you said, Matt, had made so much difference. It changed everything almost overnight for so many. Many of us had already been working virtually or in hybrid teams for a while, but suddenly it became the norm. And people realized that it's easy. Too many, though, worked in back-to-back meetings. I mean, this whole thing of Zoom fatigue or Teams fatigue. And we need to shift. We need to think how we can work better, how we can get more done. Hybrid is difficult, though, and I'm sure Holly Ray will tell us a little bit more about that, because you have some people together and they can pick up on the dynamics and nuances of conversation from the people in the room together, and others are remote. So we need to be really careful about making sure that the people who are remote can hear clearly, can be seen, and can be involved. And it's not just about technology. Technology is really important. You can't do any of this without it. But it's not the focus. Get it working, get it reliable, and then focus on makes this work, which is a new style of leadership, an inclusive environment where we can collaborate together. We all need to develop these virtual leadership muscles where trust is the foundation. Yeah, we need to work when we can work best and where we can work best. We don't all need to be together in the same place at the same time all the time anymore. How's that?
Perfect. And I never thought I would hear myself talking about asynchronous working. But very interesting, Penny. Anybody want to pick up on anything that Penny just mentioned there? Okay, well, we have an opportunity to do that in the second part of the webinar. So Simon, over to yourself, and you've been very much involved in creating a new way of working, the hybrid style at BCS. So talk to us about your experience there and what you've learned and your key takeaways.
Great, thanks, Matt. So as I already mentioned, I'm a solutions analyst at BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT. And at the beginning of the pandemic, like many other businesses, we weren't prepared for full hybrid working. There would be some people around the organisation that we've used the term home working, that they don't come into the office much. But for most businesses, we were spending the first time of lockdown frantically just building laptops for all staff, making sure they could get in the systems they needed, and to be able to just work away from the office was the main concern. And now we're at the stage where we've moved away from the reactive stage of hybrid working and now looking at how this best fits into the hybrid working model and what that looks like for BCS and for many other companies. And some of the challenges we've faced here around Microsoft Teams and the governance of things like Microsoft Teams and how we manage this as a company and as an IT department specifically. People like to create teams for creating teams, really. So we've had to make sure that we've got a good hold of the collaboration spaces we have are worth having, and that people aren't creating things just to have them. So that's been a big challenge here, and also for third-party applications that people may have seen online that want to be installed instantly. So it's quite hard to manage that side of it. But that's definitely a challenge that we've been facing. We've also had a big surge in external sites like SharePoint sites to enable a collaborative space between companies rather than the usual emailing of files. It can be a more collaborative space depending on what time zones people are in. They can all access the same files and edit the files as they need to. And again, a huge push for us at BCS has been around internal systems and how we can move these to the cloud where possible to try and reduce the need for a VPN and lower the traffic to our physical office here. We also actually moved offices during the pandemic, the first lockdown, and this was a great time to get everything into a good order ready for hybrid working and to reduce that VPN load and the reliability for staff. What we've definitely found is that the reduction of the VPN and connections to the office has helped with home Wi-Fi stability and productivity within some teams, because obviously we can manage the internal network in this office. However, we can't access what people's routers they have, what service providers they have. So these are all the challenges that we need to sort of make sure that we're inclusive of everyone, no matter how fast their internet speed or what kit they have at home. We also moved to Microsoft Teams Voice during the pandemic, and that's now hugely benefited BCS. And we have a phone system that doesn't need a VPN. It's completely integrated with Microsoft Teams, which people use on a daily basis here. And it's also reduced our carbon footprint in a way, because we now don't need mobile phones for certain users, because they can use Teams Voice as their calling platform. It's also increased our call quality and performance with the configuration, but also things like call wait time and caller dropout. So having that new phone system that's built for hybrid working has definitely improved customer experience here. We're starting to notice month on month that the meeting rooms are now starting to get more full. In fact, today I was trying to find a meeting room here in the office to sit here today, and every single one of them was full apart from this one. So it just goes to show at the beginning of the pandemic, nobody was coming into the office. But now we're starting to get that hybrid model of people in the office, in a meeting room with people on the screen talking with as well. So we've implemented new kit in the office, in the meeting rooms, which Ollie may talk about later on, and also reduced the actual times of meetings as well to 25 minutes and 50 minutes instead of a 30-minute and an hour meeting, because like Penny said, it's not always necessary to have a meeting to sit down and discuss something and then action that later on. It's we're trying to improve collaboration here, so we've got lots of sort of big screens around and breakout areas that people can sort of ditch the meeting and actually start doing something on a big screen together, really. Lastly, for me, really, there's been a big need for improved security. Now people are working from home, not sat under our nice, safe and secure network we have here, and possibly not on a VPN. So we're rolling out better security awareness videos, phishing campaigns. We've recently rolled out a last line of defense system that isolates a machine, but malware is detected before it spreads in the organization. So there's some of our challenges we've had. Some of them have been really beneficial for BCS, and some of them have been things that we're constantly working on to make sure we're still secure as a business.
Excellent. Thanks, Simon. Very interesting. Can you just give me a sense of the scale, Simon? How many people are working at BCS, and the kind of the volume of calls that you need to be able to take from customers?
Sure. Yeah. So internal staff here at HQ is about 300 staff members. We've also got offices in Sri Lanka, and we also offer exams around the world. So we need to make sure that we're handling requests from our customer service from sort of requests all around the world. So the phone system needs to be able to manage sort of international traffic and requests. So it's quite a large organisation here, from membership to apprenticeships and exams. So there's quite a lot of areas that we need to collaborate with different businesses and training providers, etc. That all have different experiences of hybrid working. So yeah, it's always a constant challenge to make sure everyone's collaborating well.
Yeah, okay. I was interested to hear your point about changing meeting times from, I think you said 30 minutes to 25 minutes as an example. I don't know, Holly, if you've got anything to add to that in your section, but that's something that I've really tried to push with my team. Is it's almost like constant contact. So we're just like picking up, well, the phone, the soft phone, and just getting together for like even 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and go our different directions. And it's like a constant contact, if you like, to keep everybody together and connected. Excellent, Simon. Thank you. Tim, talk to us about the Microsoft view and what you're seeing out there and what you're expecting to see on the horizon.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks Penny and Simon for the talk previous to mine. I could talk, and I will not bore you, but I could talk all day on this. There is so much going on. Everything from, how to make in-person time count, because hybrid isn't just about being remote. How to unlock the asynchronous collaboration. How do we get people to work same time, different place, different time, different place? How to regain the work-life balance. And we're talking about not the 9 to 5. We're talking about the fact that our day bleeds into the evening. And how can management and leadership set trends and standards to make people realize you don't have to be in a meeting 8 hours a day to be justifiably working. There is downtime required. And as Holly, you're going to come on to later on as well, is how to get hybrid meetings is right. But what I want to talk about is not any of those things. I want to talk, and I'm going to set you a little scene to start off with. In 2021, Gucci, they created the Gucci Garden Experience. So forgive me if you already know about this, but it was to sell virtual products. And in this experience, Gucci sold a virtual-only digital twin of a Gucci purse, but they sold it for $750 more than its real-world counterpart. Its digital twin was technically worth more than the real physical element. This was sold into Roblox, which is a virtual world used heavily by a generation we will see coming into the workplace over the next few years. And that leads us on to metaverse and virtual reality, and what does it mean to you in the hybrid world? The definition of metaverse that we choose to use is important because it influences our hypothesized vision of the future and the strategic questions we choose to answer. I'm not going to say to you what I believe the metaverse is. That is for you all to decide. But what I want to do is talk briefly about the benefits I and Microsoft we see coming from the metaverse. Microsoft has a very strong focus on inclusion. It's not an add-on, it's not an afterthought. It is at the core of what we do. If we look at Teams development and how it's been developed to create an equal footing for everyone, regardless of who they are, where they are, or when they are, to partake in a hybrid environment. We have to look at that being the metaverse is one of those tools to give us the ability to join in an equal footing and inclusive environment. You also have the ability to join remote parties in a virtualized world to create a stronger sense of connection. We understand that physical connection is very important. We're humans after all. The virtual world is designed to help improve the non-physical bonding that we can get when we would have been in a physical space. We have an improved entertainment experience, a depth of perception. We have surround sound now, but what about surround visual? Doesn't that then increase our level of engagement? We can augment the physical world, providing you with more information, you the user, you the person in this environment. You can be given data or guidance. You can also use it to test plans of physical systems or models that would be impractical to build physically. You can also offer to deliver real world concepts virtually, which would reduce the cost of delivery or of travel and directly impact the environment in a physical way. An example here is the recently publicized work we've had with Avanade, where they've been looking at improving and have improved the onboarding experience of their new starters. We also get the option to integrate technology more seamlessly into our environment. We reduce distraction and we allow us to fully leverage information that could be made readily available to you based on your requirements. Phil Spencer, the CEO of Microsoft Gaming, in January this year, he said there's a whole generation that are growing up where their social connection to the world is through video games. It's not just about the play itself, however, but it's about where do you hang out after school? Where do you meet your friends? What are those shared experiences that you'd like to go to together? This is our next workforce. We need to be ready for them. If we circle back to the Gucci story I opened with, the metaverse market is expected to reach almost $800 billion globally by 2024. The question I have to you all is, where and how will you begin your journey? And Matt, back to you.
I was on mute. Can you hear me again now? Perfect.
I can hear you now, Matt.
Good. I was just asking you, Tim, you just caught my imagination with the Gucci digital handbag. What can you actually carry around in a digital handbag?
That's not the purpose. It's about, and this comes down to two things called TAM, or the Technology Acceptance Model, and the UTAUT, for those who haven't heard of it, Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology. The Gucci handbag is for sense, the same as a Gucci handbag in a real world. It's a status symbol, it's an icon, it's an image. The same reason people go out and buy the latest phone. It's not because the old phone didn't work, but the new phone is hip and trendy. And this is where the marketing aspect comes in. The Gucci handbag may not carry physical components, but it has a real value to the person who purchases it, which is a really interesting concept.
I'll have to go and buy myself one. Brilliant, thanks Tim, and that's brilliant. And let's just switch over to Holly to finish with your area. Holly's in the room, that's great. And just before we move over to yourself, Holly, just to let you all know, the questions are starting to come in. That's great, and some interesting questions and a couple of comments as well. So keep them coming. And after we finish with Holly, then we'll open everything to the room. So over to you, Holly. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. How often have you dialed into a meeting where someone is messing around trying to get the camera or mic working? How about walking into a meeting room and knowing how to plug your laptop in correctly to get it to show on the screen? Or about dialing into a meeting and you can't make out the people that are sat around the table, so you don't actually know who you're talking to potentially? That time spent fixing or figuring technology out is causing unproductive meetings and costing businesses money. Hybrid meetings need to be easy and accessible for all, and you really need to keep that in mind when designing a hybrid meeting solution. Not everyone can get into the office, and it's not just about location. What about those people who, as much as the pandemic was a disruption, it also allowed a lot of people that couldn't physically get to offices to now get jobs and work in environments where they could work remotely and be included. And that might be because they have a disability and they can't physically leave the house, but they can now be included and work for companies and do their work remotely. But to do this, we need to ensure that the system and the environment are working together. And in turn, that will empower users to collaborate more effectively and efficiently. If you have the correct room set up, you'll actually reduce about 80% of the start time required to start meetings. So I was looking for some top tips or things for today to sort of share with you that you could consider when setting up a meeting space, because it's not just about having access to Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever collaboration platform you're using. It's things like the lighting levels. You need to check that the lighting is right so that all users can be seen clearly in the room, and you don't just see a little shadow in the background because there's a window in the way, or the lighting's not very good in the room, it's just a strip light in the middle. There's also things like sound levels, because echo and reverb and background noise, they all contribute to a poor meeting experience, and you need good, clear sound for all participants. Also, networking points. How good is your office network? Wireless connections are not advised for a clear audio-visual experience, and you need sort of hardwired, good, stable network connection. Things like the displays in the room. Do you even have a display in the room? And are they of adequate size and clarity for all the remote participants to be seen? Equipment. What kind of equipment does your organisation have? Does everyone have the same laptop, or the same laptop that's got a USB-C connection, for example? What equipment do you need to allow anybody who walks into that room to be able to easily plug their laptop or device in and be able to host that meeting successfully? And of course, the actual location of the devices in the room. So it's really important to look at things like where the cameras, where the microphones, the whiteboards, control panels, and all these things need to be installed. And these are just a few considerations from the technology side, but also I really believe it's not just about the technology side, and it's not just about the meeting room setup, it's about the people that are not in the room. So I think that the organizer or the person moderating the meeting plays an essential role, and they need to be aware of the hybrid nature and actively seek participation from all the attendees in the meeting to make sure that it's inclusive. What about even considering who you've even invited to the meeting? Are they actually needed in that meeting? Does the meeting even need to be a meeting? And what length of time is that meeting? Could you get done in a 10-minute session? Could you maybe reduce your 30-minute meeting even to 25? There's a lot of things to consider, and I totally understand it's very overwhelming when setting up a new hybrid workspace. So I just thought of a few top tips that I could give you today when considering these meeting spaces. So as well as ensuring that your meeting space is equipped correctly to be reliable, because users won't use it if it's not, I also think that it's quite important to try and get your attendees that are dialing in online to have their cameras and microphones on throughout, because sometimes you can see people interacting more by how they're talking, rather than just hearing the voice. You can physically see that person. I also think setting a clear agenda and why you've asked each person to be there in that meeting is really important. And utilise things like digital whiteboards. They're so underrated, but they're so good for collaboration because everybody can get involved. And finally, make everything as simple, easy and accessible for all as possible. Can't hear you, Matt.
There you go. Thank you.
Oh,
Somebody
there you
muted. It was Lizzie muted me saying that there was a background noise, but then she wouldn't. Really interesting. Thanks for that. And let's all just reconvene back in the room. Interesting things said by absolutely everybody. Thank you there. Okay. Has anybody got anything that they want to add before we just get into the round of questions? And I've got about 5 or 6 already here. But anything occur to you as you were listening to each other talking there?
I've got one for Simon. Oh.
No, I have the other way around as well. So yeah, I mean, I think here is sort of echoing what Holly's saying and just trying to change that opinion of everything needs a meeting. Really, we've got lots of big collaborative screens here that a certain small group of people do use, and I think when you see them using them, you can tell how much more interactive a meeting is and things are getting done during that meeting, and then others are sort of sat around a table making ready to action after the meeting. So I think it's really key in trying to push that mindset to people that a meeting can include productivity in the meeting as well as just taking actions to take away from it. So that was nice for them top tips. I've written all of them down ready to share internally here, so thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Simon. Go on, Penny.
Just a little point, Holly, I love digital whiteboards as well. And to build on what Simon was just saying, you can use them in a meeting, which can be quite short, of course, but then you can continue to work on them afterwards so they can support your asynchronous work. Brilliant, love that.
Excellent.
I had a little question just for Simon, because you know, you were talking about at the start of the pandemic and you rolled out Microsoft Teams to people. Did you find that at the time people were also trying to use Zoom and Slack and all the other third-party tools? And if so, how did you bring them all back in to try and get them to just use the approved solution?
Yeah, that covers one of the questions that just came in from Steve. So how did you restrict all users from creating unnecessary Teams channels? We know that scenario here very much. So.
Yeah, it's down to we had the same thing when Microsoft brought out groups and people were creating groups thinking it was a great idea, but that group also then created a SharePoint area that also created a calendar and a planner, which people weren't aware of. So it caused sort of a bit of uproar here where we were trying to manage the hundreds of groups and email addresses that we just randomly found that were here one day. So by disabling people to create groups and only a certain amount of people to create groups, which is a setting within 365, that then limited people to create Microsoft Teams. So it's more of a ticket-based thing now of all departments have their own team, and then if there's a necessity for a new team or collaboration with an external company, then we'll obviously ask the questions to make sure that is going to be a well-used space. But the question from Holly as well, yes, we had every request and every software, even things that we never heard of, that we have to research and kind of look at. So for us, it's been a really good adoption of Microsoft Teams, and we rolled it out just before the pandemic started. So I think the main adoption went way better than we ever thought because of people were almost suddenly out of reach from everybody. So it was a great tool to get people back in touch together with sort of live chat like they wouldn't have with Skype before that. So I think that it was really easy to get them to use Microsoft Teams. We have had we do have people that use GoToMeeting or Zoom around the business, but it's at a small scale and based on different limitations. And obviously, some of the companies that we work with, that we need to make sure that we can collaborate with them. So there are small use cases, but it's quite hard and challenging to manage that on a sort of a daily basis, almost, of people requesting new collaboration tools.
Yeah.
I just want to, Matt, if it's all right, just two things I want to add onto that. One of the things with the Teams adoption, and this is where it comes down to adoption and change management, is having a strategy of understanding how you're going to roll it out in the business. The second is, and I think we've had this question, Simon, I'll let you answer it more fully, but Teams is part of an ecosystem that includes security, data loss prevention. When you take a third-party solution, and I'm not saying they're better or worse, I'm literally saying they're not embedded in the Microsoft architecture, they're not embedded in Azure Active Directory, they're not embedded in the VPN-less way of working into Teams. It allows you, by keeping onto one operating platform, to keep your security and your identity all within the realms of control. And again, we have to look at the excessive setup of Teams rooms rather than Teams chat spaces. This comes down to user training quite often, that you can use both. You have to think which horse for which course. And there are options and solutions in there to take Teams rooms that have not been used and to archive them and to take them out of use. But there are also the ability, as Simon, you've said there, to prevent creation in the first place and let people focus more on using the chat capability than the Teams room capability. Matt, back to you.
Yeah, can I just ask a question there, Tim, because it's an area that I don't know. When would I want to go into a Teams room space as opposed to a Teams chat? I mean, can you give me a couple of examples of?
Teams chat is more of a, I need to talk to three of you quickly, and I want to have a question, and this might go on for a week, 6 weeks, 10 weeks. Documents shared in there come out of your OneDrive, whereas a chat is more of a static place to go and meet. You can put meetings into there. So there's really the level of integration you're going to have. Is this an ad hoc? Is it a team of people I work with on a regular basis? Or is this a long-term thing that people will need to refer back to? Again, it really goes down to how a business operates and the type of business you are in. You know, we heard mentioned earlier on about the financial industries, I think, but you could also be in retail. There are different ways of working. You might be working with a frontline worker who need a static place to go and find documentation. You might have business in a financial institution who have a sporadic, now and again, requirement to talk. It really is down to creating an adoption and change management, and it's all about training the users. The platform is easy to use, don't get me wrong, but using it in the right way is always that step further that makes sure that everyone's getting the maximum out of it.
Can I jump in there? Because with what Tim was saying, I speak to customers and from lots and lots of different organisations, from small to enterprise organisations, and the amount that I speak to, and you find that they say they're using Teams, but when you actually look at the statistics, they're using chat, and they're not actually using the team function within Teams. And it's more trying to explain to people the understanding, and that's where it's really important to get that user adoption and the training correct either from the start. But what you'll find is a lot of companies didn't get the opportunity to do that because they rolled it out so quickly because of the pandemic. People just had to find their way around, but you don't know what you don't know. So actually going back now and doing some user training isn't actually a waste of time, which some users probably would think it is. It's not, because you can learn all these different tools and techniques and things to help you work smarter that might make your day that little bit more productive, or that little button or that little app you can use might just make things a lot simpler for you.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks for that, Holly. A couple of questions that have come in. One is quite specific, and I've got a couple that are really quite broad. One from Will, and he talks about matrix working, which needs thought, he says, and they've been discussing its pros and cons. Has anybody got anything that they can add around that particular area? Any insights would be welcome.
I'm happy to jump in, or I'll make a start if someone else wants to jump in.
Yeah.
I think with matrix working.
What is it, Holly, for a start, matrix working?
So I might be wrong, but my point of view in it is you have lots of different teams working that people within a group might have different line managers and things, but they're all working together on a project or on something that they need to collaborate on, which is where I think a tool like using a team within Microsoft Teams would be really useful, because you can just add the people that are specifically needed for that piece of work or project to it, and store all your documentation and your collaboration stuff within that environment, just for the people that need it.
That's my understanding, Holly, as well. Most organisations are hierarchical in nature. You report to a manager. Now, quite often in a matrix organisation, you have a line manager who's responsible for the admin, but your way of working is you sit in multiple, we call them V teams, quite obvious. So if I'm working in this capability, we have a V team with 5 people, and then I'll sit in another V team where we focus on something else. It's really, the problem there is not, again, I think Holly, you mentioned it earlier, it's not technology. Technology allows you to operate this way in multiple V teams. It's more about a mindset and how a business operates. Penny, you mentioned it as well. I would say it's not about the 9 to 5, it's about the output. As you said, we get measured on what's called an impact at Microsoft. What's our impact? What have we done? Nobody wants to know how many hours I work, because it's not important. I can sit at a desk in the office for 40 hours a week. Does it mean I'm productive? I can sit at home for 80 hours a week. Does it mean that I'm productive? No, we have to find a way where we measure a person's contribution to the business based on what they did alongside of what they were targeted to achieve. And this is where V teams come in. I think I didn't get the full question. I'm sorry for who. I think it was Will asked the question.
Yeah.
Matrix working is, I think, more about a business process than a technology. The technology is there to support it. You need to understand as a business, how do we trust, enable, and measure our users to work in that way?
Yeah. And if I can jump in there as well and say what you really need for each of those different V teams or projects or whatever that you're working on, to lay out how are you working together in that team? What are your communication norms as a group? What are your ways of working for each of those teams? And to make sure that your line manager, whoever that is, understands all these different things and how they fit together as well, so that you can work effectively.
And actually, Penny, that moves very nicely into another question that's come in, which is all about leadership and trust. I'll just read what has come in. Leadership needs to be prepared to trust in the hybrid, fully remote model. The productivity increased and the work-life balance helps people to be happy at work. This is from Helena, and she says she works fully remotely, and it helps her with lots of meetings at different time zones. She manages her time my way, her way. Would you like to sort of pick up on the various things that Helena talks about there? Absolutely.
So Helena, you're living this, you're delivering across time zones fully remotely. What I notice in some organizations, and we see it reported in the press, is that some senior managers are saying, you know, unless I can see people working, unless they're in the office, that it's not, that they're not being productive. That is so not true. People like you, Helena, are showing that this can be done. It's really, we're stuck in some people are stuck in the command and control of yesteryear, where people wanted to control to the nth degree what their employees were doing. They wanted to be able to see that people were working. They wanted to see, you know, their jackets on the back of the chair that they were in. It doesn't work anymore. We're beyond that. We need to shift away from this command and control leadership, which is outdated now, to a much more facilitative style of leadership, where we give people what they need to get the job done, where we support as leaders. We are supporting, we're almost, people talk about servant leadership, where our focus is to support the people who work in our teams to do the best job they possibly can, wherever they are and whatever time that they're working, so that they can do the best work at the best time for them alongside the other people in their team.
Thank you. Okay. Just conscious of time here, but I have a couple of things that have come in. One from Alan, and then I think we'll probably finish back to Helena. So Alan asks a very specific question about, and maybe Simon, this might be one for you to think about, a good point about having a stable network at home. He's suggesting maybe it's best to use a physical network cable, but how is the industry going to help make things better? on the basis that IT staff can't go to everybody's home to ensure they're connected physically to their router, for example. What's your take on the connectivity side of things, Simon, and what have you experienced over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's definitely been a struggle. We had people that at the beginning of the pandemic didn't even have broadband at their house or a television at their house, so it was trying to get them to remote work was completely impossible. And I think it's sort of a change in priorities of if you are going to work at home. Actually, I think staff are taking it upon themselves now to make sure that their home area is fit for purpose now. So I think it's a bit of a balance between staff taking that point of if I'm going to be a hybrid worker, then I want to make sure that I'm productive with a good network speed. Obviously, some areas just don't have that luxury of a great network speed, but I think you can tell kind of around areas everywhere really that the push for that fibre broadband everywhere is massive, really. So, but then there is some areas here internally that we need to make sure that that our systems that we have that are capable of, if they have a good network speed, that sort of matches the system that we have here. So anything that we can put cloud-based is something that we're looking at here, and if we have a VPN or something coming internally, that is stable, and that's not going to sort of affect their work on a day-to-day basis, really. So it's a bit of a 50-50 split, I suppose, with staff to make sure that their hybrid setup is as good as it can be as well.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have anything that they want to add there, or has Simon pretty much covered that? Okay, cool. And I think I'm going to finish with back to Helen, and I'm going to take this around the room because she asks a question here that I reckon could be a whole webinar in itself, if not a series of webinars. And she says she's a global procurement manager in real estate and facilities. And she's currently changing and redesigning office spaces. So what's your opinion about new office trends, and what do you see in the future? I think that is a big one to get your head around. Would anybody like to volunteer what they're seeing? Maybe Holly, I mean, what are you seeing with customers and the way that they're talking about physical office spaces, the kind of conversations that you're having with them?
Yeah, I've been talking to quite a lot of customers because everybody's got this on their mind of what does the new office look like. You know, they might be condensing a few offices into one because not everybody's going in the office every day. They don't need a big space anymore. But it's not just about these massive open plan offices either. And I think it's about having the right collaboration spaces. So places, quiet places for people to go off and have a one-to-one meeting together, or they've got an online meeting they need to dial into where they're not disturbed by other people. But also things like, we've done it ourselves in our London office, in Clarinet London office, there's some big, like, what I call it, big workbenches, or a big picnic table where you can just literally go to the office, hook up your laptop, and as more people come to the office, they join, and you end up sat around this big table and you're chatting, and you're able to really speak to people and collaborate in a much more effective way, as well as having desk spaces with dual monitors and a dock where you can plug into, and having social spaces where you don't take your technology, you actually go physically talk to someone in real life. And I think it's about having flexible spaces that we can in future easily change and move around as trends change.
Excellent, thank you.
I'd just like to add on to that one. I've seen similar organisations who were moving at the start of the pandemic in 2020 and didn't know what to do and literally put it on hold for 18 months. What I have seen with the organisations I've worked with and what I've seen within Microsoft is there is a focus on making sure that when you have that in-person time, it's for a reason. So when you go to the office, one of the biggest struggles people have at the minute, and we've seen this in our work-life index, people need to have a reason to go to the office and they need to understand the value. Going to the office to keep a seat warm is not a good reason. So we need to work out, how do we get people there? What reasons do we bring them there? Is it for a whiteboard session? You mentioned earlier, I love whiteboards. Do you really need to be in person to share a whiteboard? Technology lets you do that. when you go to the office, Holly, you just mentioned it. Do we leave our laptop outside and include the people who are there? But we also always have to think about inclusion. And one of the things, I know we're getting close to time, so I won't make it too long. One of the things we saw out of the pandemic is the catchment area that organisations used to use to employ staff has dropped. It's not the catchment area, it's the time zone. And even with asynchronous working, you get to work outside that. So the people who previously were excluded from working in the centre of London through dint of ability to travel or physical location are now included in the ability to provide value to those organisations. And we need to realise that a meeting space has to create a hybrid environment for those who can and want to get to those offices, and those who cannot but would like to still want to feel included. I'll leave you one last thought, and then Matt, I'll hand back to you. 5-10 years ago, it was the norm for 10 of us to sit around a meeting table and have an audio conference where one person may be remote in the car. That one person in the car had one or two roles. They either championed the call and talked louder than everyone else, or were a forgotten participant. That cannot and must not happen in the new virtual world that we're going into. Back to you, Matt.
Absolutely, and yeah, we as a team had to learn how to talk to each other remotely. That was a real skill that we had to develop, because otherwise it was everybody with each other. So that was a real interesting experience. Penny, Simon, any final thoughts from yourself?
Yeah, just to build on what Tim was just saying, you know, about that, if there one or two people who are remote, and if everybody else is in the office, we need to actually support them properly. We need to have a sort of remote first thinking. So when we ask questions, we ask them first. We let people have a buddy in the office meeting, so that if there's some conversation happening and they've missed something, they can just send that message through to the buddy who will update them or make sure that they're included. So yeah, not so much about office space, but about how we are. But the office space, so many people are saying that they're using the central space for socials, building relationships, and that's the most important thing. And then when they go off and they work, they can work much better together remotely because they know each other. They've got the relationships and they've got trust. Tim's just added a brilliant comment in the chat that we've got going, saying that side chat is allowed, but only in the chat window, not verbally. Absolutely, yes. You don't want sort of side chat happening. It's very distracting and leaves people out.
Absolutely. And Simon, just a final thought from yourself in terms of you've moved spaces. So what's you looking at? What's your thoughts there in terms of how things are changing and what are the trends in your experience?
Yeah, I think so. So when we moved, I think we have got a lot of meeting rooms and a lot of, or I had some breakout rooms, things like that in the office. But I think now we're living in this office now. I think the collaboration spaces, in fact, this week we've had requests to sort of move things about and have more collaboration spaces and more sort of one-to-one areas and things like that, because we're starting to see around the office people going for smaller meets or smaller chats that they don't need necessarily a meeting or working with an interactive whiteboard, but even things like our social events that we would have in the office, they're all inclusion based now. For with included like a webcam or a quiz will be virtual and physical sort of quizzes or things going on in the office. In fact, at the moment we're organising a curry night / virtual curry night, which I don't think was ever thought about a virtual. I'm still not sure how that's going to happen yet, but yeah, there's all these sort of inclusion and how a modern workplace is going forwards with hybrid work, and I think inclusion is the main word I think here. That is, yeah, it's just how we can include everybody, because we've got a very mix of remote or international staff here, so it's how we can get everyone included and not left out in the workplace.
Excellent, thank you. And just to let you into a secret, my workplace at the moment is myself sitting in the living room with the desk pushed up against the fireplace. I've got 2 bedside lights shining down on me, and I've got my phone on timer sitting in a glass that's been on the desk right in front of me there. So that's how I'm working today. Really good. I'm conscious of time. We're coming up to the hour and it's nearly lunchtime. So yeah, thank you so much for your time today. Really interesting. And everybody, I think we haven't really lost anybody throughout the hour, which is fantastic. Been keeping an eye on, are we losing people? No, but they're all there. So I hope you enjoyed this session. We'll be in touch very soon, and with a link to the recorded version of the webinar. And if you have any questions, then by all means, please get in touch, and we hope to keep talking. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy your beautiful hybrid day, and speak to you soon. Thank you.